whenever you get a problem like this, at least for me, what I'm initially doing is, and I'll share my screen, I apologize, is I'm, I'm just saying out loud, like, the relationships between these entities. It's a way, like, I understand it, like it's kind of how I make sense of these tables. So I'm just starting to try out things. Like, I'm like, a tour has many cities. That's wrong. Like a tour, or actually, it's not wrong. A tour probably can have many cities. So I'll say that. Tour has many cities. At first I was like, okay, you only go to one city on a trip, but that's not true, right? A tour can have many cities. Does a city have many tours? I would say yes, right? You can see city has many tours. So, like, it's a bit safer if you lean towards that has many relationships. Like, for instance, you might say, and maybe this lab encourages you to say, that a tour has, only has one category, but that's probably, a tour really could have many categories. Like, it could be either or, and because of that, you lean to the thing that's, like, more flexible, which is, okay, a tour has many categories, and if there's only one per, that's okay, like, it's like storing one entity in a list. Like, we can do it, right? It's fine. All right, so, as you read through these things, the first thing I do is I just kind of make sense of the relationship, like give it a first go of, like, the relationships. Okay, so a tour has many cities, a city has many tours. Yeah, that makes sense to me, right? Because now I'm, like, relating it to the real world, right? A tour stopping at many different locations, and even if I'm, like, in Paris, right, there can be, like, many different tours that, like, go through Paris. And then, okay, a tour has many categories, and a category has many tours. That also makes sense, right? Because we can have different, like, history tours and whatever. So you can see, like, I'm taking something abstract, I'm giving myself an example to make it more concrete, right? And doing something like this, like, in an interview is totally appropriate, right? It's great because it shows, like, you're logically thinking through it, and then you're checking your work with a concrete example, all right? And, like, that process, whether it's this data modeling or, like, solving a problem, okay, I feel like this is the plan, run the code, do a sanity check, right? Always a good thing. Okay, and then these tour stops, tour categories. So you can see, it seems like these are my join tables. Notice you automatically can almost, like, get a hint of it, right? You really get a hint here that this is two tables combined, right? We're linking two tables, tours and categories. Here, this is, like, a little bit of not a misnomer, but it's not telling us exactly our what we're joining, because I think this is like a tour stop. Well, what does it mean to stop someplace? We could say, like, this is like, here you're stopping at a city or some location, right? If I'm thinking like a tour bus. So there is, like, so now we have this tour has many categories. This category has many tours. This is through this tour categories table, right? So if you're mapping this tour categories table is what's in between, just to quickly show it, right? If we're mapping this, we have tours here, we have, right, categories here, and then we have the tour categories, right, in between. So a tour has many tour categories, and then a category has many tours through this tour categories table. Okay? So this is how you would, draw it or think about it. All right? And then in your words, like, to me, like, when I say that, okay, a tour has many categories through tour categories, in my head, this is what's being drawn out. All right? And then the next thing that you should probably do, once you are starting to, like, visualize this, then you can start to add in your foreign keys, right? And that's the main thing that we care about, and that's why I gave it to you as work. Is like, okay, here's the ID, here's the tour ID, here's the category ID, right? And this links it. For the tour stop, right, this is tours and cities. So let's just, sorry, I wish I had more space. Here's cities, and then this is the stops. should be here. All right, here's the stops. Here's the cities. So what links a tour to a city? So tour as many cities through the stops, and now you can start to link it. Okay, this city, this tour ID 1, right? City ID. Sorry, this is a mess. And then the city ID is 1. So this says that this city, on this tour, we stopped at this city. All right, and that's what associates it. So the point of going through this is this stop thing exists in the real world, right? Like this table of tour stops, this relates to something like in our domain, in the real world. This tour categories thing does not, all right? So you cannot always lean on something in the real world to find this table, right? To find the join table. Sometimes you have to start with the relationships, right? You start with saying the relationship, a tour has many cities, a city has many tours, right? You can write out then the join table, and then you can see like, all right, well, what does that mean? Like what makes, a tour associated with a city, right? It's the fact that we were stopped there, we were there, right? So that's like the transaction. Like lots of times these join tables will be a transaction, right? Like, the stop or whatever, where it could be, with e-commerce, it's the order, right? The purchase, right? And that's what joins a customer to a product. Here, what joins a city to a tour is, all right, stopping there. So lots of times it's like an action, right, that occurs. Or with doctors and patients, it's the appointment. That's what makes it, right? With teachers and students, it's a classroom, or the course they take, right? So there's like the meeting, right? The coming together in the real world that occurs. And that's oftentimes our join table, but not always, right? In the case of tour and categories. So, what is the point? Why kind of say that? It means that your process really should be to, write out the relationships, right? Think through them. Then from there, you can write out kind of like the join tables, kind of sketch it out. Okay, we have city, we have tours, and then we have this join table that connects the two of them. From there, you can try to see if there's something in the real world that relates. Sometimes there will be, sometimes there won't be. Okay, but that. If you came to think of stops as an entity later on, it wouldn't be that huge a deal. As long as I have, if I already have this join table that has like the city ID and the tour ID, I don't know what the difference, if I say like you stopped here, cool, we have this city ID, I stopped here. The only thing I'm seeing is kind of like the time maybe that you stopped there, or the date, right? So there's not too much to change, even if we didn't realize that this really mapped to something in the real world. We have the crux of it, which is, this joining of these two foreign keys. All right. So this is the approach, right? Write out, describe your relationships first. You can draw them. That's oftentimes very helpful. Write out the foreign keys, and then, see how they map to the real world. All right. So yeah, if you're still working on this, that's fine. Continue working on it. If you're done, then move on to this OLTP querying lab, followed by the modeling practice. I think this one's interesting. It's modeling like an airline, I believe. Yeah, so it's not too much. Here you go. Model flights. How do we do it? Right? But something like this, like I've definitely gotten these questions kind of with this level of specificity before in an interview, and they expect you to talk through it. Okay, questions about either the lab, we can talk more about this lab and how to do data modeling, or just any other questions in general. All right. So what's next for you all is check to make sure that you got the invite to the course, accept it. Then go to Data Engineering June. You can start with these two, and that should be good. Yeah, that should be pretty good. All right. I'll move you back into your breakout rooms.